Welcome to Journals Roundtable. I'm Phil Beckman. Today we are joined by Kristen Smith, the Pennsylvania editor for the Center Square, Ed Mahon, an investigative reporter with Spotlight PA, and John Cole, a reporter with the Pennsylvania Capital Star. John, Democrat Jim Prokopiak won a special election in the State House's 140th district. The Democrats now, they've had a narrow majority in the State House. How will this affect that majority?
Certainly, and thanks for having me on, Phil. So this special election got a lot of publicity the past few weeks and past few months in Pennsylvania due to the narrow nature of the State House. For a while, it was locked in even exactly between Democrats and Republicans. Although, interestingly enough, the Friday before that special election, a Republican resigned. So actually, Democrats now going into that race had a narrow majority. But this got a lot of attention because after State Representative John Galloway resigned from the seat after winning a seat as a judge in Bucks County, both parties thought they could potentially make a play at it because Bucks County is widely regarded as a battleground county in the Philadelphia area. And even though this particular district, the 140th in Lower Bucks County, leans Democrat, both parties certainly wanted to make an effort because the impact it would have on the majority of the State House. Having said that, though, Prokopiak won by a rather sizable margin. He served in elected office in Bucks County prior. He was a township supervisor in Falls Township for a while. He also currently serves on the Pennsbury School Board. Democrats were heavily invested in the race. The DLCC invested a fair amount of money into this race specifically to help Prokopiak's effort, and he pretty much coasted in this race. And again, now after he was sworn in, Democrats will have a 102 to 100 seat majority. Having said that, there is another special election, a term we've gotten quite familiar with in Pennsylvania since the narrow majority in the State House, that there will be a special election. I think it'll be the same day as the Pennsylvania primary to fill a seat in Northeast PA after a state representative resigned up there. And that's a rather Republican-heavy seat. So most likely after those races are over, Democrats will once again have a one-seat majority for the rest of this year. Unless there's another special election, who knows if there will be any more that'll pop up.
Now, John, special elections are often a time where people try to read the tea leaves and see if there is any larger trend for the general elections that we have going on this year. What do you see in this election, or was it just a local set of issues?
That's a great question, and I think everyone's kind of wondering that right now because talking to both candidates, I mean, even though this was a race just in Lower Bucks County, the eyes of the state and the eyes of the nation kind of to a certain degree were on it. I talked to the Republican candidate in the race prior to the election, and she talked about it being a lot of pressure. She said she was door knocking and there was a Washington Post reporter joining her for that. So even though it was a race of just a State House district in Lower Bucks County, people wanted to see, is this an indicator of what may come later in the year? I don't know if I'd want to go as far to say it will be, but I know Democrats certainly feel good that they were able to win in such comfortable fashion. Previously, when John Galloway was a Democrat who had the seat for over a decade, last time he ran unopposed in 2022. And when he ran in 2020, he won by 20 points. So even though it is a battleground kind of viewed as a purple county, Bucks County, that particular district is blue leaning, at least. I think Biden won it by close to 10, if I'm not mistaken, in 2020, although Representative Brian Fitzpatrick, who's a Republican, won that. So it's an area that has shown that they can split their ticket. Is it an indicator of how things will go in November? I think it's too early to say, but I know Democrats were happy that not only did they win, but they won in comfortable fashion. I believe it was like 30-some points Prokopiak won by.
Ed, you're an investigative reporter. You cover opioids. Talk a little bit about your work there as an opioid investigative reporter.
Sure. So, opioid crisis in Pennsylvania, thousands of people are dying each year in opioid-related deaths. We've seen this epidemic evolve over time. Now there's meth and fentanyl both playing a role in sort of exacerbating this crisis. People are probably familiar with opioid settlements with drug companies that are going to be bringing I think the latest estimate in Pennsylvania is $1.6 billion and above. There's a lot of debate about how that money should be spent, and we've been taking a close look at what the rules are, where the rules have leeway, and also where sort of the settlement documents themselves conflict with Pennsylvania law.
So as you've been covering this topic, this has been an issue for a long time. Mm-hmm. Is there a sense that we're making progress on it?
I think that, there has been progress made. I think there's also been the epidemic keeps evolving, and so there's been ebbs and flows in terms of total deaths. But the deaths are still, high. I think it was like over 5,000 people last year in drug deaths, most of them opioid-related ones. And so you've seen a lot of, increased access to naloxone, which is the opioid reversal drug. And there's been other progress made, but there's still a lot of people dying.
Now, one of the efforts that people are trying to make to help alleviate this is providing syringe services. And you've written about this. There is some legislation looking to work its way through. What are you finding that people are trying to do?
So syringe services programs, these are programs that offer clean needles, clean syringes to people who use drugs. And the idea behind them is that if you provide people with the access to these materials, it's safer for them. You give them a chance to connect with someone who can help them maybe get into treatment. And there's research, supporting that is more likely to happen when people are getting help through a syringe services program. And the last main part of the argument is that it's better for everyone in the community because people can then have a safe way to dispose of needles after they've been used so that the broader community is protected. So people are trying to do that. Pennsylvania is one of about 10 states where those programs are widely considered illegal outside of Philadelphia and Allegheny County. And that's because our drug paraphernalia law includes syringes as banned drug paraphernalia when they're intended to be used to inject banned controlled substances. There is legislation making its way through the State House that would create an exception in the law so that those programs would not face criminal penalties, people operating those programs. And that kind of change could open up more funding opportunities for those programs as well. A number of programs operate in the shadows right now. They either have tacit, either prosecutors in their area aren't targeting them, don't know about them. They're sometimes run out of people's trunks of their car. But that threat always hangs over those programs.
Kristen, earlier this month, Governor Josh Shapiro gave his budget address to a joint session of the House and Senate in Harrisburg. And you write about one moment in there where he says, quote, that Pennsylvania needed to stop losing to friggin' Ohio. That seemed to garner some attention. And you write about Representative Seth Grove's response to that. What did he think of that, and who did he think we should be competing with?
Seth Grove is the House's Republican number cruncher, and of course he had a lot of thoughts about that great moment of levity from Shapiro during his rather lengthy speech. His argument is that we don't even need to be worrying about Ohio. Our major competitors are North Carolina, Florida, places like that who have really competitive, in his perspective, business tax policies and other policies that encourage a lot of people to move there, a lot of jobs, a lot of growing industries. He thinks that competing with Ohio is a waste of time, and then also competing with other close neighbors like New York and New Jersey is sad, really, because he believes they're bottom of the barrel when it comes to business and economic policies.
What types of policies would he like to see implemented to help Pennsylvania become more competitive?
So he agrees with Shapiro and the legislature broadly that we need to do more things as a state to encourage people to stay here once they graduate and to encourage businesses to come here. And so things like lowering the corporate net income taxes they've done have garnered praise from him. But he also believes that being more efficient with the way that the state already spends this money will help them to continue to hold the line on taxes and offer more incentives for businesses to come here. His view seems to be that the administration has the right idea, but the wrong way of going about getting the results that they want.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. One way when it comes to competing with Ohio is that voters in Ohio, they voted to legalize recreational marijuana last fall. So you've got Ohio, New York, New Jersey, Baltimore, Delaware have all taken steps or legalized recreational marijuana. Pennsylvania, we haven't, and our neighbor West Virginia hasn't, but a lot of these other neighboring states have, and that's also part of the governor's budget proposal. So that's just one other aspect of that competition.
Is the revenue expected to be generated from that, enticing people to support?
Yeah, I don't know if it's enticing. I don't know how much it's enticing people to support. The revenue, Shapiro's administration has estimated about $250 million, I believe. Last year, the Independent Fiscal Office, with a similar proposal, they estimated somewhere in the a little under $200 million. But so it's hundreds of millions of dollars a year. I think the Senate is controlled by Republicans. I don't know. There's a few Republicans who have come out publicly in support of recreational marijuana in Pennsylvania. It'll be interesting to see how that progresses and how much openness there is to that idea in the state Senate.
John?
Grove did make some comments about that in general. He said he believed the House Democrats would fast track recreational marijuana where it could go to the Senate for budget negotiations. Like Ed said, it's unclear where that would wind up. There's been multiple attempts at bipartisan proposals to enact, a recreational marijuana program. I think on that side of the chamber, they've also been focused on legislation that would improve the medical program as well in dealing with how does the state handle DUIs and other ways of making it more comprehensive in the way that they deal with the existing users in the medical program.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. When it comes to existing users, there are a number of rights issues with them. DUI, as Kristen mentioned. There's gun rights, which Senator Laughlin, I believe, is trying to address. There's employment, which is a huge issue because there's a lot of gray area in terms of what someone's rights are to work in certain jobs if they use marijuana. Employers have safety concerns, and they also just have concerns about the legal gray area of that. And so there are a number of gray areas that could be addressed in the medical program, and that would also be very interested to watch if they are addressed in a legalization bill as well.
John, you've watched budget processes go through and seen several budget addresses. Was there anything in this address that really stood out for you, being that it's Governor Shapiro's second time?
Besides the length, which I think Kristen did mention that it was a rather lengthy address. But no, I would note that I think Democrats, by and large, really embraced his message where Democrats are rather united. And I know the Republican response immediately after I was able to pop my head into the Senate Republican response and the House Republican response that day. And they certainly were quick to disagree. They described it as kind of, they basically viewed it, at least Senate Republicans viewed it as a non-starter. They thought there was a lot in there that they thought it was going to in their opinion, raid the rainy day fund. And they, it's the beginning of budget negotiations, but it's clear to say that they're far apart right now, at least as of when the speech was delivered, that Democrats, again, were all on board. They thought it was a rather ambitious plan, and Republicans are questioning, I guess, how does this, can Pennsylvania really afford to fund all these things in the proposal? So Democrats certainly like it. Republicans were not shy about voicing their displeasure. And now the negotiations, I suppose, can begin for the next few months.
Kristen, one of the topics that came up during the budget, some of these budget discussions are that we have a budget surplus and the money that's in the rainy day fund. And there are differences between what the governor wants to do with that money and what Republicans in the legislature want to do with it. Where are those differences?
So I think one of the big differences is not only how they view spending of those funds, but some of the mandates, I should say one specific mandate, which education spending, we're coming at it from a different position this year than in years past. The legislature has spent $2 extra billion on education in the last few years. However, this is the year that we have the results of a court case that said we don't fund our school districts equitably. So the Basic Education Funding Commission, they came up with two different plans to fund districts more equitably. One was approved, one was not. And it calls for a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar plan to make this work. Republicans are concerned, are flat out arguing that Shapiro's being dishonest about his spending plans because he wants to spend $1.1 billion this year. What are his plans for the next several years? How are we going to keep affording this, considering that we agreed that we need to uphold the constitutional right to fund education equitably? So I think that education is always a lightning rod of controversy in the budget negotiations, and it will likely be the cornerstone of any negotiation this year. It's just that that constitutional mandate is going to play a very large role in what those numbers end up being. It seems that both legislatures want to invest more money into education. Specifically, Republicans believe we shouldn't tie it to a specific dollar amount every year. Uh, Democrats believe that we should hit specific spending targets.
Now, Ed, we were talking earlier about the significance of the opioid crisis. Was there anything in the budget that you saw that would address that this time around specifically?
I don't think there was any major initiatives with the opioid crisis. I think there was some smaller programs targeting the Department of Drug and Alcohol programs. I think an Office of Recovery. I think there was only a few $100,000. I didn't see anything major or as a sort of a major, point of contention going into these budget hearings. But I'll be watching for it in the budget hearings as well.
John, you wrote about U.S. Senator John Fetterman traveling out to Nevada for a campaign event. That's pretty far afield from Pennsylvania. What was he doing out there?
Sure. So this past Saturday, Senator John Fetterman, on behalf of the Biden-Harris ticket, was campaigning in Nevada and one of their swing counties. The Biden campaign described it as the top swing county in Nevada. It is in the northern region of the state, going to bat for the Biden's reelection campaign. And it's interesting because as we get more into this 2024 cycle, it seems that Fetterman's going to be one of those voices that will be used as a surrogate on the campaign trail, where a few months ago, Senator Fetterman was the headline speaker at an Iowa Democratic, a gathering of Iowa Democrats. And we know how Iowa, although maybe not a battleground state anymore, it's early in the primary cycle. So he spoke there. Fetterman's scheduled to speak in Idaho next month at a gathering in Boise of a gathering of Idaho Democrats. So Senator Fetterman's hitting the trail for Biden. He's becoming one of the more vocal, supporters in Pennsylvania that is trying to not only, I guess, rally the troops in Pennsylvania, so to speak, but he's also taking the message on the road. And again, he's already done a few. He has one scheduled for Idaho next month. And again, I know that's a Republican state that I don't think the Biden campaign really will make a push for. But it's noteworthy that Fetterman is out and about on this campaign trail rather early. And I don't think we're going to see the last of it. I think he's going where the Biden campaign sees fit, where they think he can help them. Senator Fetterman probably will do just that and go out there for interviews and to promote the Biden candidacy. And also worth noting, this past weekend, Governor Josh Shapiro did a sit-down interview with ABC News promoting Biden's candidacy. So we're seeing two top Democrats in the state promoting Biden's reelection campaign in different ways. Again, Fetterman on the ground in Nevada, where Governor Shapiro was on a national TV interview that aired Sunday morning. So the Pennsylvania Democrats at this point have largely rallied around Biden's reelection effort. And now, it seems, I know it's only February, but it seems as though the 2024 cycle is really in full swing.
John, former President Trump was in Philadelphia recently, and you were there. What did you see at the event?
Yeah, so again, to the point of the 2024 cycle really being underway, President Joe Biden has already been in Pennsylvania 3 times, and now former President Donald Trump has been in the state twice. 2 weeks ago, he spoke in Harrisburg at an NRA presidential forum in which he was a keynote speaker, delivered an address that was over an hour and 20 minutes, largely around the Second Amendment and gun rights, and then sometimes you would drift off into other conversations. This past Saturday, though, was an interesting, more surprise appearance, I think it's fair to say. He visited Philadelphia to speak at, quote, SneakerCon, an annual gathering of those who, I guess, are interested in trading and buying shoes, some collector items, things of that nature. It was the 15th anniversary of SneakerCon in Philadelphia, and it was only one day prior that they announced he was going to be there. So during his visit on Saturday, he unveiled, speech was very, very brief, as opposed to his NRA speech where he talked for, I think, just under 80 minutes. This speech was about 5 to 10. And this was not, again, a Trump rally. This was truly just Trump speaking at a SneakerCon event. At the event, he unveiled his own line of shoes, gold shoes, and then he had a few others on his website there. Some, I guess, supporters of Trump present holding signs saying sneakerheads for Trump. It appeared that, again, Trump's speech was very brief, talked just about, promoting this shoe that he is now selling, as well as reaching young voters, because the primary audience there, it's safe to say, covering both Trump's speech at the NRA and his 2 weeks ago in Harrisburg, and the one this past Saturday in Philadelphia, two very different audiences, where the one in Philadelphia at SneakerCon was a young audience, a rather diverse one. And it's in, Philadelphia, of course, known as the Democratic Party's, strongest county in the state. He was making a pitch, it seemed, to young voters. He even had a quote during his speech saying, we need to get young people to vote. So it seemed as though it was kind of a play, I guess, to win over potentially some young voters. In the past two elections, when Trump was at the top of the ballot in 2016 and 2020, the Democratic presidential candidate won younger voters from 18 to 29 and even the next age group up. But maybe there's a reason that Trump sees an area there to grow there. So he specifically, in his brief address, made a pitch to say he needs to get young people out to vote, and he's making the case that he should be their candidate.
Kristen, recently the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association wrote a letter to Governor Josh Shapiro regarding skill games. What are skill games, and what did the District Attorneys Association want them to do?
Skill games are different from traditional casino games in the sense that there is a level of user intervention that is considered a skill versus just a randomized winning or losing function like you would see on a typical slot machine. So the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association is concerned because they believe that these machines, because of their unregulated gray area that they operate in, they're often in places that have very low security, if not any security measures. And so they're more of a target for thieves because there's cash kept in the machines. And they're just worried overall about the broader impact on public safety. The bill is at least the second or third year that lawmakers have considered regulating skill games. Supporters expect about $300 million in revenue from it. And there is talks of ways to strengthen public safety concerns in the bill, but talks are still ongoing. So the District Attorneys Association just asked Shapiro to have their backs essentially in negotiations and make sure that any regulatory scheme that we may come up with for skill games really puts an emphasis on this public safety concern.
Ed, you wrote recently about a settlement between the Department of Justice and Pennsylvania court system regarding medications for opioid use disorder. What was the dispute there? Why was there a need for a settlement?
This case goes back several years, and part of it started in Jefferson County when a judge imposed an order banning a wide variety of these medications that are used. They're federally approved medications. They're used to treat opioid use disorder. They have widespread support in the scientific medical community that they can reduce the odds of someone dying from an overdose. There was a judge who had a blanket ban, which gave people the choice of either, according to the settlements and interviews, according to the allegations and the interviews we've done, people had the choice to either quit your medication or risk going to jail and prison. And so that's a horrible choice to face. And so some organizations got involved there. The judge lifted that ban, but there were still allegations of widespread discrimination in courts across Pennsylvania. Department of Justice got involved 2 years ago, filed a lawsuit against the entire state court system. There was some legal back and forth. They amended the complaint to include some specific court systems as well. And then after some negotiations, those court systems and the Department of Justice settled the claims. And the settlement, it requires 3 counties to impose these anti-discrimination policies that will allow people to guarantee access to medication for opioid use disorder. And then the state's court system overall is required to encourage other county court systems to adopt this same anti-discrimination policy. And it'll be really interesting to see which court systems actually adopt this anti-discrimination policy. And that's going to be something that happens over the course of months that we'll be watching.
John, tell us a little bit about the Pennsylvania Capital Star and what you'll be covering this week.
Surely. So this past week was the deadline to file objections for the nomination petitions for those trying to be on the April primary ballot. As we speak, there have been a challenge to a number of candidates running for office and in a legal effort to get them off the ballot. Some challenges to some candidates claim that some signatures are not valid, they don't meet the threshold, et cetera. So working on stories to note how that's going. Also, CPAC is currently going on in Washington, D.C. A few Pennsylvania elected officials are slated to speak there, as well as candidates for office. Congressman Scott Perry, former chair of the House Freedom Caucus, is slated to speak, and Dave McCormick, Republican, running for U.S. Senate, is slated to speak at that. So I'm curious to see what their message will be to this annual gathering of conservatives, as well as what their message is to a national audience. They're running for office in Pennsylvania.
Ed, we talked a little bit about your role at Spotlight PA, but tell us a little bit about Spotlight PA.
Sure. Spotlight PA is an independent, nonpartisan news organization. We're a nonprofit. We have more than 90 partners who distribute our work across the state. So our stories often run in newspapers across Pennsylvania. You can also visit our work at spotlightpa.org. We're really focused on, investigative work and government accountability on issues across Pennsylvania.
Kristen, and on to you. Tell us a little bit about the Center Square.
Sure. The Center Square is also a newswire service. We appear in lots of smaller rural newspapers who can't afford Associated Press and other traditional wire services. We focus on stories from a taxpayer-oriented lens, which I like to call your return on investment stories. We like to explain what we're spending and what we get for that and where the accountability holes are. And that is where we spend most of our time. And so when we are in budget hearing season, like we are right now, it's truly the busiest and somewhat most informative time of the year for us at the Center Square.
Well, our guests have been Kristen Smith, Pennsylvania editor for the Center Square, Ed Mahon, an investigative reporter with Spotlight PA, and John Cole, a reporter with the Pennsylvania Capital Star. Thank you all for joining us. And I'm Phil Beckman. Thank you for watching.